Tonight on Newsnight, we discuss matters South Sudan. We know that the Riek Machar team that arrived yesterday and returned immediately without even coming into Kampala were here to meet President Yoweri Museveni, of course, on discussions ongoing on the civil war in South Sudan. Now, that team will arrive next week and an appointment has been scheduled for them to meet President Yoweri Museveni. Tonight, we discuss the exit plan. Does Uganda have an exit plan in South Sudan, or is that actually on the table? That and much more coming up. Welcome back. You're watching Newsnight with the old man of the clan and CEO of the Independent magazine, Andrew Mwenda. Andrew, the East African has an extensive piece and you have some issue with that. But do we actually have an exit plan on the table to leave South Sudan?
No. Excuse me, boss.
Why would you say that?
Because you see, I think that Uganda deployed blindly in a very troubled country. There wasn't sufficient time for the government of Uganda to plan how to exit. You see, when you're going into this, I follow the Colin Powell doctrine.
Yes.
Whenever you're going to enter a conflict of that nature, you must have very clear political objectives. What is the political outcome you're looking for? I don't think Uganda government thought deeply about that. There was no time, and I'll tell you why it happened like that. The second thing is, what are your military objectives and how do you measure success? How are you going to say, now we have achieved what we came to do? Because that requires you to identify your key result areas. Now, from that, then you ask, then how do I exit from this situation? The way it happened is when the fighting started in South Sudan, the Minister for National Security, who is called Mamour, immediately picked the phone, even without consulting Salva Kiir, and called Katumba Wamala. Katumba Wamala said, look, I don't have any authority to deploy troops in South Sudan. You need to talk to the president. When he called State House, they said, look, the president is aboard the plane. So they gave, President Museveni can be reached when he's on his plane. So he called President Museveni on the plane. The president said, okay, I will be landing in Kampala in 6 hours. I will immediately take a decision. When the president landed, he was given a brief from General Mamour explaining that Juba was going to collapse in a very short time. And it was going to collapse to forces the president did not know about very well. You remember that President Museveni has not had a good relationship with Riek Machar. He was linked to the people of John Garang, and through him Salva Kiir. So the president called a high command meeting where he discussed with his officers and they agreed they must immediately enter and stabilize the situation. Why? Because a lot of the militias that were rebelling against Salva Kiir were not necessarily, and up to now, are not necessarily under the direct command and control of Riek Machar. And the fear was that if they take over Juba, they may not be able to control the violence of the forces that will be taking place, that will be meted out, and you may have a Central African secular rebel situation, and that had to be stopped. Why? For a number of reasons. One, Uganda has a very strong security interest in South Sudan. If there is violence there, Kony can easily take advantage of it, and that will pose a security risk to Uganda. There would be a refugee situation that Uganda would have to accommodate, and there's so many Ugandan businessmen and business interests that would be at stake. So Uganda intervened almost, I would say, instinctively, without thinking an exit strategy. Now that Uganda is there, that is why this is very important. That the question then becomes, we are already there, how do we get out? Let me tell you, I think that President Yoweri Museveni recognizes that Riek Machar is an important factor in the political equilibrium, or at least in the establishment of a political equilibrium in South Sudan. And
even through force, is actually not a pushover. That he's managed to sustain this war, civil war, over 6-7 months. It's coming to 7 months now.
Well, let me explain the military component. Uganda government troops, when they entered UPDF, they engaged the forces of Riek Machar about 100 kilometers south of Bor once. And they decimated them so badly.
Yes.
That the forces of Riek Machar ran away. They have never engaged UPDF again.
Yes, but the
UPDF advanced, entered Bor,
yes,
and has stayed in Bor. Now, when you hear that there is a conflict in South Sudan,
yes,
the conflict is in Bentul.
Yes.
Bentul is 1,023 kilometers from Juba.
That's ongoing. Even yesterday.
Listen to this.
Yes.
How many kilometers? 1,000 more. 1,023. That is even from Mutukula beyond Gulu up to Juba.
Yes.
In other words, the conflict is very, very far away. And the persons fighting, and that's why I had a problem with the story in the East African, the Uganda army is not involved in the current fighting. In fact, it is helping the training of SPLA
Yes.
to fight the rebels in Bentul and other outlying areas, but the nearest area of the conflict is 1,000 kilometers away from Juba.
All right. Let's look at the demands for the UPDF to withdraw. We have demands from the Obasanjo-led AU Commission of Inquiry on South Sudan. We have demands from the US, from Sudan, the north itself.
From Ethiopia?
Ethiopia. So we need to start thinking how to leave South Sudan. And not because we're being pushed out, but because we can't stay there forever.
And that's what is surprising me, because historically, President Yoweri Museveni has been extremely good and adept at managing diplomacy. In which case, I would have expected him to have, after initial intervention, to have built a broader coalition to ensure that Uganda can have regional support for its troops to stay there. Now, I can tell you that I've talked to President Kagame. He was very much in support of Ugandan involvement in South Sudan. He felt even if he was President Yoweri Museveni, he would have taken the same decision. So President Uhuru also felt Uganda did the right thing to intervene.
But
it was
IGAD,
important.
They've actually said we
but
need
they
to
have
withdraw.
said in IGAD they should send an IGAD force. Me, I think that Uganda's first saving exit should be through IGAD. If IGAD says they're going to send troops, then Uganda can withdraw and the IGAD troops take over. Because the problem I have with Uganda's involvement are two elements. One, that this is a political conflict involving a political power struggle within the SPLA factions led by Salva Kiir and Riek Machar.
Yes.
We have intervened to support one side. In other words, we have already, and because the conflict itself is ethnicized between the Dinka and the Nuer, we have alienated the Nuer, who are an important ally of Uganda, because Uganda cannot afford to support only one side to this conflict.
Done two, very quickly.
Two, we also intervened to support the weaker side. You know, sometimes it's better for you to support the strong to win.
How do you determine the stronger side in this crisis?
When General Moore called President Yoweri Museveni, he said Juba was going to fall in 2 weeks.
It could have been the other way around. Say if Riek Machar was in office and maybe
Riek Machar
a Dinka-led force was fighting him, it could have also made the phone call.
Yes, but this is my point, that Riek Machar was rolling these guys and they were collapsing like a pack of cards. So at that moment, it would, if I had been in President Yoweri Museveni's position, would have been to intervene to strengthen the hand of Riek Machar, who was already stronger.
Right.
But there is, of course,
Quickly,
some people in South Sudan have told me another thing. They said, look, Riek Machar, because he had forces which were loyal to him, were near Juba. Because there were many other forces in outlying regions which were loyal to Salva Kiir, which could also have mounted a counter-offensive and perhaps found Riek Machar in Juba, and then you would have had a bloodbath. So we are right now not very sure, because the situation was that fluid. But the bottom line is this.
Yes.
At all costs, the aim of the government of Uganda should not be to support Salva Kiir. It should be to bring the different groups that are at conflict, the different factions, together around a negotiating table. Right. Without achieving a minimum political consensus, Maurice, I can tell you, Uganda's involvement in South Sudan will turn into grief.
All right, thank you very much, Andrew Mwenda. This is a story we will be following for you. It is a developing story. We know that there will be a meeting between President Museveni and probably Riek Machar in the near future, with his team coming to Kampala next week to meet President Museveni. But that's a discussion for another night, and that was Newsnight.